This is the Starting Block Podcast. Guys, if you're new to the show, welcome. This is the show for complete athletic development. The objective here is to give you the tools to win, whether you're the athlete, the parent, or the coach. As always, I'm here with my co-host, Chris Scarborough. What's up, man?
Hey, good afternoon.
Guys, our show is slightly different than your standard podcast. You're going to hear multiple shows within the show. First one you're going to get from us is going to be a Q&A. We have been a little off on the Q&A this year, actually, seeing that's already November, and I think we've only put out 3 Q&As this year.
Right.
It's just kind of been one of those years. But Q&A is usually a bi-weekly episode. That's where we'll take the questions you submit to us, and we'll tackle them. To submit questions, you can reach me at on Instagram is my primary platform at farmerjohn_ELP. And Chris, where can they get you?
Instagram, Fast and Agile 49.
And we'll tackle those guys. That can be anything related to the strength, the rehab, the performance, the the neuro stuff. Any questions on our guests that we bring on, we'll be happy to tackle them there if we can. Next episode is going to be a guest interview, and that's just like every other podcast on the planet. That's where we bring in our friends and colleagues from across the country, and they share their stories of success with what they do with their clients and their patients and their athletes. And hey, if you have any guest requests, like by all means, let us know. Like, don't feel, we have, you guys are pretty regular listeners to the show, so it's like, you got any requests, like, send them our way. Happy to bring them on. The people that we've brought on before, align with our values, our core values and mission. And I'm happy to bring on somebody we've never even heard of. Like, that'd be cool just to connect, even if we may not agree on everything. It'd still be cool just to chat and talk. So if you got somebody you want to hear, let me or Chris know. We'll do what we can to get them on. And lastly, you're going to get a Friday Fire episode, maybe once a quarter, where it's just about 20 minutes of me just brain dumping on you. And then, like I said a couple episodes ago, we're going to reignite the athlete spotlight. We had a couple athletes come on, had some recording issues, no surprise there. But I think this Christmas break, when we get some of our college crew back, we're going to really try to ramp that up hard. I know we got a couple girls from ELP that are going to be joining the show. Chris, I know you've talked about a couple of yours that want to come on as well. So I just think that's going to be a really cool segment, just to hear from athletes that have kind of had to deal with, the stuff that Chris and I implement and how it's helped their, success or hinder them, one or the other, I guess. But yeah, so we'll reignite that as well. It's just kind of been a weird year. Like, it's gone by so unbelievably fast, and it's like I felt like some of the goals we set for the podcast this year, we kind of missed some of them, and next thing we knew, it's like we had a recording issue here and there, and the next thing you know, it's November. So
right, exactly.
Try again.
Time. Yeah, in fact, this is actually attempt number 3 on this podcast, John, because the first one was I'm not sure what happened with the first one. The second was definitely
nothing. I just didn't like it.
issue.
I just didn't think we did a good job. I thought both of us did a pretty shitty job on it. I didn't think the content was good, and so I'm not going to put it out. That's
there you go.
Simple.
And so
I have a high standard for what we do, and I'm not going to put out something that was bad. And then the second one, we had internet issues. So surprise there as well. So again, for some reason we've had a host of technical issues this year. And hopefully we can get all that resolved, and this will become less of a problem this upcoming year, 2025. Yeah, I'm sure it has nothing to do with the prospect of World War III happening and them messing with the power grid or anything like that.
Not at all.
I'm sure it had anything to do with that. So. So we got a couple good questions. And the last thing I'll say, remember, guys, just share the show. Like, if you get value out of it, please just help us spread this. I haven't checked the ratings in a while. Last I checked, I think we were top 150 in 5 different countries, and we cracked the top 100 in France, so I appreciate that. And guys, please, if you support the show, just share it and help us continue to grow. We appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
So I think that's about it. Let's get this thing going. Let's make people better today.
All right, very good. All right, so John, this was geared primarily toward you because it refers to GOATA. It is asking his understanding about GOATA and moving forward, whether it be running or walking, just propelling yourself forward, that GOATA calls it an anterior chain movement. Although the only thing he can consider is that the only way to propel yourself forward is to extend at your hip joint, which would be a posterior chain movement. Can you please help him understand this? from a GOATA perspective.
Okay. Well, I think, let's see, first off, I think we could both agree that there's essentially two different types of way to run, right? Or move. You can still push and propel forward, right? Or at higher speeds, you could pull and propel forward. Would you agree with that?
Uh, well, honestly, in both, you do both. You pull and you push.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, you always pull, you always push.
Right.
So I would say, you know, again, this is coming from a non-GOATA perspective, but I would say, you
Right, but I
always
think
do
when you
both.
look at it from like you have two different components, you have like a pull runner and a push runner.
Right.
And I know last time we talked about this, you brought up the way that Corfus breaks
Yeah.
it down.
Right. He,
So essentially, even though you're kind of doing both, you can kind of be dominant in one side more than the other.
right.
Accurate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you're looking at it from what Corfus calls it, either a stomper or a slicer, when he's referring to a sprinter or somebody running in a sprint. So if you think about it in these terms, a stomper would kind of be slamming his foot almost straight down into the ground. Well, the problem becomes now you have this rather powerful braking action, and you have a much more powerful deceleration, not to mention a lot of pounding in your body when you do that. And as a result, most people who are elite would be what he would categorize as slicers, meaning they pull their leg behind them. Um, you know, but in order to they're going to basically use the hip extensor to bring the leg from in front of their body to underneath their body, and it kind of swipes the ground, for lack of a better phrase.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So with that going into where, and I'm not going to speak, just because I teach GOATA and I'm GOATA certified doesn't make me the authority on GOATA by any means, but I don't really know if I agree with them in saying, that running, I don't remember what the post was or what he said, but like if running's anterior chain dominant, like, no, I mean, you can have push or pull, or slice or stomp, but I think, the fast people are going to be the ones that can access that posterior chain, and they're going to essentially pull through that range of motion, through that hip extension of glute, hamstring, contralateral, quadratus lumborum, right? That extension-based pattern. So we know that. So I think it's, when you look at GOATA, it's not necessarily a matter of, whether it's anterior or posterior dominant. I think as much as understanding that GOATA it's a behavior. And training GOATA allows us to access these qualities more efficiently. So the way that I like to think of it is, I think the nervous system is always going to try to conserve energy. And so like it doesn't really want you to go run per se. It wants you to, conserve that energy in effort to survive. And so when you take that into consideration, you sit all day, you're constantly just in this anterior front chain dominant type of thing, and then you go try to train. Well, even a lot of movements are still going to recruit a lot of anterior dominant type of. It's going to build the anterior capacity up. So like even squats, like sure, I mean squats will build your glutes up and all that. I get that, but they're also going to build a lot of your quads as well. Like you can't deny that. Would you agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so like you may have a strength ratio deficit between those two, and so naturally, even if you go try to run, even though you maybe built up that backside because you sit all day, because your natural tendency is just to be front chain dominant, even though your squat went up, you're still going to try to access the quads. The body's always going to try to go to that larger, stronger muscle there. So I think when we compare it to GOATA, it's more about understanding that GOATA is a behavior, and the ability to access those qualities. That's what the training is all about. And we follow those global GOATA laws. So like feet straight, inside ankle bone high, you load the bow, you release the bow, you keep your head within the column, and you have and maintain spinal flexibility. All these components are things that help us remain back chain dominant. They help us access that, where that power and explosiveness is. And I just don't really feel like squats and deadlifts or even RDLs do that all the time.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's my, and I'm not saying those are bad exercises,
right.
Not at all. But what I can tell you is putting my crews through GOATA work, every single one of them got faster, every single one of them. And we didn't do any speed work. And that's because some of them had a baseline strength, some of them didn't. It doesn't really matter. But all we did was we just taught their nervous system to just rewire and get back to that high octane, high performance component. Whereas in traditional training, I don't really think, like weight training, you don't really get that anymore.
Well, you got to remember, in most movement patterns, one movement sets up the other, and
Yeah.
I'll agree with you. So, let's take someone who is very, a much more strength oriented athlete. Maybe maybe they can lift the house, but they don't do a whole lot of maximal speed work. Let's say, yeah, they will have a noticeable pattern. They usually do not have very good high knee lift. They don't usually lift they don't flex their hip. Okay, they don't flex their hip very high in order to drive it down. And you got to remember, if that hip flexes, once it stops, it's reversing direction. If it comes from a higher position, it's going to generate more force down and into the ground. So it's good to understand. It's not like it's more dominant one or the other. They have to coordinate. Flexors, your flexors and extensors, they have to coordinate. The side, I'm going to call it the lateral chain or the side benders, if you will. They have to coordinate. If they don't, you're going to have a deficit somewhere. You're going to have some loss of speed and, even potentially a higher risk of injury. That's true of anything. That's not purely a GOATA principle. That is just fact, right? So don't think of it as dominant one way or the other. It's really more how balanced are they? How well do they work together? You work them well together, you have a faster, probably much more resilient athlete, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, I just go back to saying, and I hope this answers your question, the behavior of being GOATA helps us to access that extensor dominance, which is what we want, which is what you were referring to, right? But the muscle balance does play a role in that as well. And, like I said, overly developed quads with a lack of hamstring and glute development, for example, you'll tend to be, a heel to toe runner, and you'll have trouble planning, getting off the ball of your foot, things like that. And you have these compensations that will develop and that will naturally break you. Not necessarily, well, maybe physically it'll break you, but it'll put you in a breaking pattern as well. And I mean, would you agree or disagree, Chris, that like if you're breaking or slowing down, you're probably going to be a little bit more front side dominant on that.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely, yes.
And so when you have these faulty patterns here, you're going to naturally start to break, in my opinion. That's what I have found. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe other people have seen different results, but that's just what I've seen. That's how GOATA has helped our athletes get healthier and be faster. Doesn't necessarily agree with everything, man. So I know exactly, because you and I have talked about this on Instagram a little bit too. Doesn't mean I agree with everything they say, but I can't. The results speak for themselves, is what I'll say, and what it's done for ELP, no doubt. That's a good question, man. I hope that helps.
It is. Yep. And by the way, I just want to add one quick thing on that. And there's a lot more to it than just what a single leg does. In sprinting, for example, there's a lot of reflex action that goes on. So keep in mind what happens on one side is very, very heavily influenced by what happens on the opposite side of the body. So keep out. It has to do with the extensor reflex and everything else. So just keep that in mind. It's more than just what a certain leg does.
Yeah, and so as I told you on the DMs as well, bro. Like, I do believe that if you put that in your arsenal, with as strong as some of your crew is, you'd probably see some pretty good results. So, all right, question 2.
All right. Well, I get asked this a lot, John, so I don't really have a specific written question, but this is brought up to me quite a bit. All right. And it's referring to when is it time to add weight to the bar, or when is it time to add weight, period? When is it time? When do you know?
That's a good question. I mean, in relation to any particular exercise or just the Evo system or what?
Everything. Because I'm not sure this would be specific to the Evo system. I think this would go across, a lot of this would go across boundary, across any system.
When is it time to add weight? All right. Well, obviously the basics of proficiency and technique are priority number 1. So, until you can master technique, then you don't need to start. And I think that goes with whether you're squatting or whether you're doing an ISO extreme. Position and technique is number 1. but I'll speak on it just from the basics of lifting. So a bench press, a squat, a deadlift. I tell people, like, if you want the nitty gritty of it, like, I enjoy doing just, we'll hit a main lift with our crew and then we'll move on. And a lot of the other parts of my training involve more contrast work with a lot of Evo stuff, GOATA stuff thrown in there, kind of mixed together. But like, if we hit a main lift, if it's with an athlete that is proficient in the move, I'll just run 4 sets of 5 on them. And I got this from Christian Thibodeau, where once they've completed all 4 sets of 5 reps with that weight, then next week they can add 5 or 10 pounds to the lift, or 10 pounds for the lower body, 5 pounds for the upper body, and that's just a super easy, basic way to get stronger and add weight. Now that's just from the basics of lifting. From like an iso extreme side of stuff, if you can hold position, I think it depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish. So, if we're going to try to train, displaying maximum strength, then yeah, I'm going to have them load as much as they can and hold for like 10 seconds. But it's all dependent on, can they maintain position.
Right. By the way, and one of the things that, as far as, holding position or, keeping the right position. Now, we'll see a lot of people that appear to be in the right position, but that they're not activating something. So, I mean, one of the key things, in fact, I actually fuss at my athletes for saying this. How long do you want me to hold it? Well, if you know anything about an iso extreme,
right,
you don't hold anything. You are not holding anything. You're always pulling toward the floor. So one of the things that I refer to them, I ask them, okay, if you're in this position, does your knee hurt when you're doing this lunge, for example? If you say yes, my knee hurts, 99 times out of 100, they are not engaging their hamstring on their lead leg. They're not pulling into position. They're trying to hold themselves there. So there's little subtle things, especially that I love about iso extremes, in that.
Yeah, I got a fly in here that's driving me crazy.
John, if you're listening to this on the podcast, John is absolutely, he looks like, if you were to see him on the video, you think he's gone insane. Anyway, but it's, if you feel knee pain in that lunge, like I said, 99 times out of 100, you're not pulling with your hamstring. You're not pulling yourself to the floor. You're trying to hold yourself up. Okay, the same thing would be true of a wall squat. Well, if you start feeling those types of sensations and you don't have any weight, other than just your body weight, you're not ready to add anything yet. Because you might have the right position, but you are not engaging the right parts of your body. So I say, yes, position, make sure that you're engaging the right parts of the right muscles to keep you in position. And then you can start, once that becomes consistent, then add weight. That's always, that's my statement to them. And again, if I have somebody who wants to put on maximum muscle mass, agreed. Try to get some weights on them, soon. I mean, other people who have no desire to add weight, I don't care if you ever add weight, to your hands or not, or add weight to your exercise or not. It almost doesn't matter at this point. So,
this probably goes against most of the advice we give people, but I just think back to this week, and we were doing extreme slow preacher curls, and we have a big younger group right now, a lot of 7th to 8th graders. And they were just like at the top position of the preacher, just holding the bar. And I barked at them like, that's not the exercise. That's not what you're doing. Oh, well, it's not heavy enough. No, you're not engaging the right muscle. You need to be engaging your tricep, trying to extend that arm. And they could not understand what that meant.
Right.
And so did I add weight? Yeah, I added like a manual type of hold, just so they could feel like what it felt like to have this tension. Now, granted, that was the bicep, but because they were able to engage the bicep, they finally learned, like, oh, that's what that feels like. Now I can engage. I know how to engage that tricep the right way. And so, I had like manual resistance on them the whole time, not really pushing down too hard, but just enough to where they had some resistance to where they could feel the muscle engaged. And I know that's not necessarily adding weight, but it's adding that just proprioceptive feedback to them. Athletes are so disconnected from their body this day and age, they can't feel anything.
Right. Yeah.
But going back to adding weight to other movements, if I'm doing a max hold, once they can maintain position, I'll start to add weights. Or if we're doing like an altitude drop lunge or something, if I see that they can land that lunge proficiently and stick it, then we'll have them hold a dumbbell or something like that. And that could be pretty early on in their training. It might even be a couple days, but it's about being smart. I'm not getting a 7th grade girl and giving her a 40-pound dumbbell to load on a standing altitude drop lunge. We're not doing that. But if she's able to, stick it with with her body, then I'm cool with that. For example, we started a baseball camp with a program down the street from us, and there was she was 10 or 11. She wanted to run the program with it, and we had 70 kids. She was the best out of all of them. She was like 10 or 11. She dominated. If you follow my Instagram page, you'll see a picture of her holding an ISO lunge there.
Right.
And so, like, she held it. I could pull on her front leg, and she knew how to engage her hamstrings. It was like, hey, you got it. If we're going to hold for 10 to 20 seconds, let's add a little weight to it. Why not?
Yeah, well, you know what? Well, first of all, again, I'm going to have to fuss at John this time because he's used the word hold twice in that one comment there. So, yeah, I know. Well, I told you, engage. Thank you. So anyway, yeah, it doesn't matter your age. It does not matter. It's all about are you doing it correctly? You do it correctly. It's kind of like you take I don't know, John, you probably know this. You take an egg. If you get it like a dome and you push top and bottom, an egg is almost unbreakable if you try to squeeze it, try to compress it, like a chicken egg. If you turn it at least,
can't say I've ever tried that, but I guess I will tonight.
Sorry, yeah, I was going to say if you got plenty of eggs, I suppose. So if you tilt it just
actually
a little bit,
we've decreased production a ton. This cold weather, the ladies have stopped laying.
Yeah, well, we'll have some eggs pretty soon, or when it turns warmer, I suppose. But anyhow, you take an egg, like a regular chicken egg, and you try to squeeze it top to bottom, try to compress it. It's almost unbreakable. It's like the dome of a building. As soon as you turn it just a little bit off and you squeeze it, you're going to break it. All right. The right position is almost unbreakable. Okay. You might yield in the sense that you might fail sooner. But if you're in the right position, that athlete will not get hurt. It doesn't matter what the load is. Yes, you might.
It's a good statement.
You might fail sooner, but you will not get hurt. So that's just kind of my point. So it's not really load then becomes what is it kind of what you said, John, earlier. What are you lifting? What are you doing it for? Do you need it for strength? Do you just want to get stronger? Okay, great. We can add yes, we can add weight. As soon as you get it right.
Yeah. Another good question. We got any more?
Well, kind of back to the similar question about GOATA from the same gentleman that sent you the first question. I think he's just kind of wanting to get some general idea, like what is it about?
I know what you're referring to. No, aren't you referring to the guy that asked us about like the functional fitness question?
Yeah, kind of. Basically, what is it? Basically, what is it that separates GOATA? I mean, what is it that separates GOATA from, say, let's just say Evo?
Everything. I mean, they're not even remotely the same.
Okay.
Okay, I guess I'm confused. I thought we were going to answer that. I thought we were talking about that other question where the guy was asking us about the controlled environments versus the chaos.
Oh, yeah, certainly. We can answer that one too. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll answer the first one because it's a fairly simple answer. Like, there is no correlation between GOATA and Evo. They're completely separate things. They're not even in the same category is the way that I look at it.
Okay.
They're both training systems, of course. But with me, like, GOATA has become almost a big foundation for me before I get into Evo. because I have just personally found that a lot of people they just can't move at all. And because they want to add weight too fast on different holds, they don't hold positions, things break down. Or because of what they're doing at school all the time, all the horrible and atrocious patterns they're developing because their dad is trying to teach them how to lift, or they're doing stupid shit at school, they develop all these front chain horrible patterns. And so they try to get into a lunge and their knee hurts, And so obviously, like you said, their hamstrings aren't doing their job. Oh, but he can hamstring curl 70 pounds. That is not what I'm talking about. It has nothing to do with it whatsoever. So GOATA I have found to be a very good system to help progress somebody movement-wise and to get them, I don't want to say pain-free, but get them moving and feeling better. But I blend the two very, very closely. So they're different systems.
Kind of lays that movement fundamentals.
It does. And don't get me wrong. Like, I think, back when, I don't want to speak for Jay or Dr. Jay or anybody else, but like back when they were doing this 20, 30 years ago, like it's a different world now.
Yeah.
It just is. Like it's a different world. And I personally just feel like people need it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So now onto your the second question. So let's get into the chaos, as you were referring to. So what do you think? Should you, in a team environment, let's face it, that athlete does not know exactly what kind of position they're going to be required to be in particular play and, the particular demands of their game. They might have to change direction. Maybe, this week I have to defend against a really slow person. But next week, man, I got this kid who can fly. So clearly the demands of defending different players are going to require different things from this same athlete.
Yeah.
Chaotic, right? So how do you go about, from a training perspective, how do you go about addressing that?
Yeah. Well, I know where people come from when they see things like, we're going to do sprints with the tsunami bar and with kettlebells attached to bands on the bar, or stand upside down on a Bosu ball, or, put the Bosu ball upside down, stand on it, because it's working on balance. I mean, you go back to the old NASM stuff, stabilization, strength, power, the old OPT model, right? Like, I can understand where people think that is beneficial. Like at surface level, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, would you agree with that?
Well, I mean, sort of.
It sort of does. Like, it does make sense that, like, okay, if I'm going to squat on a Bosu ball, I'm improving my balance. I have to be. Look at how the ball shakes. On the surface, that makes sense.
Right.
But
in reality, I was going to say, but in reality, I was about to lead you on there. Mm-hmm. So
in reality, it does not. And I remember a story. I don't want to say who the name was because if the story's wrong, I don't want to throw him under the bus.
Right.
But I remember, I think we were at a bar, having some beers, just talking about some stuff. And I remember we talked about this question. It's probably 12, 13, 15 years ago at this point. And his response was, let's say I'm throwing darts and I want to become a better dart thrower. So I'm going to practice throwing darts on an upside down Bosu ball. Does that make me better at throwing darts? No.
Right.
It does not, right? You just became better at throwing darts on an unstable surface. Does that translate to being able to throw darts on a stable surface? No. It's a learned skill. Very similar like an agility ladder. Is the agility ladder actually making you faster? No. It's a learned skill or learned pattern. Now, you can go to the other side of the equation, and I remember being in the FRC certification and people being, a couple of the instructors being like, look, you're always going to get injured in the position that you didn't train in, which is usually that extreme awkward position, which I can't say I disagree with. You look at some of these freak injuries, and where are they? Like, a lot of them, they're in these extreme lengthened positions and awkward angles. So do we train like that? No, like on Bosu balls, and no. We train in extreme lengthened positions, though,
right,
with high force and high velocity. Yes,
right. Which once again, I mean, that's pretty much where the whole concept of iso extremes, rebounds, and altitudes came from. Mm-hmm. Now again, I'm talking about purely from an Evo perspective, not from a not from a GOATA, because again, I'm not a GOATA
I'm not. This
person,
doesn't have
but
anything to do with GOATA.
right. This has it has everything to do with.
If anything, this
what-
has to do with kind of comparing Evo with FRC principles almost.
Yeah, it's really kind of again, just as you said, John, watch somebody tear a ligament without contact. It's usually just something just freaky. Yeah, they stop to make a sudden change of direction cut, and knee just goes, or same thing could be true of an ankle. It just kind of goes. It's like too much force is going through the body, more than that particular area can absorb, and there it goes. It's just gone. Thus the reason why you train to absorb a lot of force.
I think so. Let's look at it this way. So with FRC type principles, they talk a lot about passive and active ranges of motion, and a lot of times somebody's passive, which is where you can take the joint to. So let's think baseball. Let's think shoulder external rotation. You can externally rotate their arm to whatever degree, but they cannot actively get there themselves without some type of compensation. And so the belief is, okay, well, we need to train that joint. We go from we put them in passive and we make them engage actively. Cool. That makes sense, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's compare that to an iso extreme push-up. Are we not agreeing that we are doing almost the exact same thing?
I was about to say, it sounds like pretty much the exact same thing.
Right. We're going to the extreme.
But yeah.
Now, where people might have the argument is saying, well, the elbow's only at 45 and you don't have this 90-degree abduction. So how do you correlate those two? Or does that even matter, do you think?
Ultimately, it probably would to some degree. Now, that said, that's where practice comes in a lot of times. Whereas, let's face it, as a conditioning coach, for the most part, we're going to train them in the areas and in the parts that they're probably going to see in almost every single sport in pretty much everyday life, right? Are we going to hit every single one? No. But but they still have to then go practice their sport. So are we ever going to train the specific motion of pitching, for example? No. But are you going to develop the various muscles and the various ranges of motion so that they should be able to pitch better? Yes. So where's the gap, kind of crossed? That comes from training and then practice. Not, we're not going to have them train in the weight room just like they practice.
Yeah. And I think it's impossible to be able to do all that. And I would much rather take my time with an athlete, train them in the extreme positions, get them as strong as possible in those positions, learn how to utilize, to be able to go high speed, high velocity, high load in those extreme lengthened positions, than worry about upside down Bosu ball training because I'm trying to work on single leg stability with 90-degree angles of a trap bar over my head.
Agreed.
I don't care about that. It's impossible. Now, the only caveat that I will say is I do believe in the FRC principles and things like kin stretch. I do. I found great benefit out of it. So, yes, I will still, maybe at the end of a workout, if you don't know what kin stretch is, it's like the farthest level of the FRC program. It's kind of teaching the principles in a group class. It's cool stuff, and I don't care how in shape you are. It's extremely hard. But you take things to the end range of motion, and you learn to control them in the end range. So, yes, I will still implement little things like that, but that is secondary in my system to movement and Evo work. It is last, no doubt.
Yeah. Right.
No
yeah,
doubt.
because it'd be a little, but you could, let's face it, one advantage of that is you could get a little more specific in, let's say, a particular person's weak range, a very specific weak range or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think when you train in the lengthened position, that's the weakest position of the body.
Yeah. Train
there, and the brain will be able to take care of the rest. The brain knows the end and the beginning, the middle, it'll take care of.
Agreed.
All right. Well, I think we made some people better today.
Yep, I think so too.
I hope so. All right, guys, if you got value out of the show, give it a share. Please bring us a friend. Let us know if you got questions or, like I said, you got a guest recommendation. Happy to take them.
Yeah, please
Appreciate you guys.
send in the recommendations. Yep.
Yeah, send them in. All right, appreciate you guys. Love you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.
Yep.